It was an ordinary Saturday morning when everything changed for the Wilson family. The sun was shining, the kids were playing in the backyard, and breakfast was just finished. Lisa Wilson, the mother of 5 and wife to David, grabbed her purse and keys like she always did. She smiled at her youngest daughter, gave her husband a kiss on the cheek, and said, "I'll be back in an hour. I just need to get groceries and some things for dinner." That was the last time they ever saw her. Hours passed, then the whole day, then a week. Lisa never came home. David called the police that night after realizing something was terribly wrong. Her phone went straight to voicemail. No one had heard from her. Her car wasn't found. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The police searched for days, then weeks, and then months. They checked local stores, cameras, highways, and hospitals. There was no sign of her. Flyers were put up across town. David went on TV, begging anyone with information to come forward. But nothing ever came. Some people whispered that maybe she left on purpose. Others thought something terrible had happened. But David never believed she would leave her children behind. Lisa loved her kids more than anything. She was the kind of mom who packed handwritten notes in their lunches and read them stories every night. She wasn't the kind of person to just walk away. The kids struggled to understand what happened. The oldest, Josh, tried to take care of his younger siblings as best as he could, even though he was just a teenager. David, who was already in a wheelchair due to a car accident years earlier, did his best to hold the family together. He cried at night when the kids were asleep. Every birthday, every Christmas, every Mother's Day felt empty. Her absence was a wound that never healed. Life moved on, but the pain never left. They kept a photo of her on the fireplace and talked about her every day. They never stopped wondering where she was or what had happened. Years passed. The younger kids grew up without a mother. Friends helped, neighbors offered support, and the older kids matured quickly. David never remarried. He couldn't move on without answers. Then one day, 14 years after she disappeared, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived. It was addressed to David, and the return address was from a small town 3 states away. At first, he thought it might be junk mail, but when he opened it, his hands began to shake. The handwriting was familiar. It was Lisa's. The letter was short and strange. It simply said, "I'm sorry. I didn't want to leave. Please forgive me. I need to tell you everything, but it's not safe to write it down. Come find me. I'm at the Red Oak Inn, room 112. David stared at the letter for a long time. Could it really be her? Was it some kind of cruel joke? The kids were now teenagers and young adults, and all of them gathered around the table, reading the letter in silence. None of them knew what to think. But one thing was clear. After all these years of pain, confusion, and waiting, they finally had a lead. David knew he had to go. He had to find out if it was truly Lisa, and if so, why she had been gone for so long. That night, he packed a small bag, hugged each of his kids, and with his oldest son by his side, set out on a long drive toward the Red Oak Inn. None of them could sleep that night. None of them could imagine what they were about to discover. The drive to the Red Oak Inn was long and quiet. David and his son Josh didn't talk much at first. They were both deep in thought, nervous, and full of questions. Could it really be Lisa after all these years? Was it a mistake, or maybe someone playing a terrible joke? Every possible thought ran through their minds. The letter was real. The handwriting looked exactly like hers. Josh remembered how she used to leave little notes for him in his lunchbox. The loops in the letters, the soft curves in her signature, it all matched. Still, they didn't want to get their hopes up too high. They had been disappointed too many times before. When they finally arrived at the Red Oak Inn, it was just before sunset. The motel was small and quiet, tucked away at the edge of a small town. It had a rusty sign, faded curtains in the windows, and only a few cars parked out front. Room 112 was at the far end. David's heart pounded in his chest. His hands trembled as Josh wheeled him up to the door. He raised his hand and knocked. For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, the door opened, and there she was. Lisa stood in the doorway, older and thinner, but still very much herself. Her eyes were red, and her hands shook as she covered her mouth in shock. David couldn't believe it. She looked like she had been through something terrible. Her hair had a few streaks of gray. Her clothes were simple, and there was sadness in her eyes. She stepped forward and knelt beside David's wheelchair. No words came at first. Tears flowed freely down both their faces. Josh stood frozen, staring at his mother, the woman he hadn't seen since he was just a kid. "I'm sorry," Lisa whispered, her voice shaking. "I'm so sorry." She reached out to touch David's hand. He didn't pull away. He couldn't. He had waited so long for this moment, dreamed of it for so many nights. But there were no easy answers and no quick explanations. After a long, emotional silence, she invited them into the room. It was small and simple, with one bed, a suitcase on the floor, and a single lamp on the table. Lisa poured them water and sat down on the edge of the bed. "I didn't leave because I wanted to," she said. "Something happened that day, something I never expected." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I was followed from the store. I noticed a man watching me in the parking lot. I didn't think much of it at first, but as I got in the car, he opened the passenger door and forced me to drive. He had a gun." David and Josh were stunned. Lisa continued, her voice shaking. "He took me far away. He told me if I tried to run or call for help, he would hurt the kids. He knew our names, our address. He had been watching us for weeks. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. I kept quiet because I thought it was the only way to protect you all." She explained how she had been moved from place to place, never allowed to make contact. The man was part of a group that did terrible things. She was used, trapped, and watched constantly. Years passed. Eventually, she found a way to escape. It took courage and planning. She had no ID, no money, no phone. Everything had been taken from her. But when she finally found a chance to run, she took it. She ended up in a small town, working at a diner under a false name, trying to find a way to reach out without drawing attention. "I never stopped thinking about you," she said, crying. "I dreamed about coming home every single day. But I didn't want to put you in danger. I didn't know if they were still watching." David sat quietly, tears in his eyes. Josh was speechless. It was too much to take in all at once. Lisa begged for their forgiveness, saying she understood if they couldn't forgive her. But David held her hand and whispered, "You're home now. That's all that matters." The next morning, David and Josh sat quietly in the motel room, still trying to understand everything Lisa had told them. It felt like a dream, but they knew it was real. Lisa had hardly slept. She sat by the window most of the night, staring out into the darkness as if she expected someone to come after her. Every little sound made her jump. The fear she carried was still very strong. David could see it in her eyes. Even though she had finally escaped, part of her was still trapped. Josh tried to comfort her, but it was hard. He didn't know what to say. He had lived most of his life without her. Now here she was, suddenly back in his world, and everything felt upside down. Lisa made coffee for them using the small machine in the room. She handed each of them a cup, her hands still slightly shaking. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were," she said softly. "I know I miss so much. Birthdays, holidays, watching you grow up. I can never get that time back." Josh looked at her, unsure of how to feel. Part of him was angry. Another part was just relieved she was alive. "I used to cry for you every night," he said finally. "I kept your photo under my pillow. I didn't understand why you left. I thought maybe I had done something wrong." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "No, never," she whispered. "You didn't do anything wrong. I fought every day to stay strong, because I knew one day I might see you again." After breakfast, David called a trusted friend back home who worked with the police. They needed to report what had happened. Lisa didn't want to, afraid it might bring danger to her family. But David explained that if the people who took her were still out there, they needed to be stopped. Lisa agreed, though her voice trembled as she gave her story over the phone. The officer promised to keep things quiet and send someone to meet them the next day. Later that afternoon, Lisa sat with David and showed him a small notebook she had kept hidden all these years. Inside were notes she had written to herself, Memories of the kids, drawings of their faces from what she could remember, even their birthdays. It was her way of holding on. Each page was filled with love and pain. David flipped through it slowly, stunned at how much he had fought to keep their family alive in her heart. "You never gave up," he said quietly. "Even when the world turned dark, you held on." They spent the days sharing stories. Lisa asked questions about the kids, what they liked, what they dreamed of, what kind of people they had become. Josh told her about his younger siblings. Emma, now 16, wanted to be a teacher. Ben loved animals and talked about being a vet. Little Lucy, who barely remembered her mother, was sweet and smart and always smiling. Lisa cried quietly as she listened. So many memories she had missed. So many hugs, laughs, and bedtime stories that had been lost. But now there was a chance to make new ones. She didn't want to waste any more time. That evening, they took a walk around the quiet neighborhood near the inn. Lisa held onto David's arm tightly, still nervous, but feeling just a little safer. The fresh air and sunlight seemed to help. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a prisoner. As they walked, Lisa said, "I don't know if the kids will accept me. I wouldn't blame them if they didn't." David stopped and looked at her. "They need time," he said gently, "but they'll see what I see. You never stopped being their mother." Lisa nodded, though her heart was heavy with doubt. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in 14 years, there was hope. When they returned to the motel, Lisa checked the locks 3 times before sitting down. She knew tomorrow would bring more questions and more fear, but it would also bring her one step closer to home. The next day came with both hope and fear. Lisa barely slept the night before, afraid that the people who had once taken her might somehow find her again. But she also knew she couldn't keep hiding. She had come this far, and she owed it to her family to keep going. The police officer David had contacted arrived that morning. She was kind, calm, and listened carefully to everything Lisa said. Lisa told her about the man who had kidnapped her, how he forced her to live under control, how he moved her from place to place so she wouldn't escape. She gave every detail she could remember: the streets, the houses, the names she overheard, and anything else that might help. The officer promised to investigate quietly and keep Lisa safe. After the interview, Lisa sat in silence for a while. For the first time, she felt like someone might finally help her put an end to this nightmare. That afternoon, David called the rest of the kids and told them the truth. He explained that Lisa was alive and safe, but that her story was more painful than they could have imagined. At first, the younger children didn't know how to react. Some cried, some asked questions, and some just sat in silence. Emma, who had become strong and thoughtful over the years, was the first to speak. "When can we see her?" she asked. David smiled softly. "Soon," he replied. "She's ready to come home." The family agreed to meet at a nearby cabin a few days later. It was safer than returning straight home, and it gave them a private place to reconnect. Lisa waited nervously at the cabin, pacing the wooden floor over and over, her hands wringing together. She hadn't seen her children in 14 years. Would they recognize her? Would they forgive her? What would they say? When the car pulled up, her heart almost stopped. The door opened, and one by one, her children stepped out. Josh came first and gave her a nod of encouragement. Then came Emma, Ben, Lucy, and little Max, who wasn't so little anymore. Lisa stepped outside, her legs shaking. At first, no one said a word. Then Lucy ran forward and wrapped her arms around Lisa's waist. "Hi, Mommy," she whispered. Lisa dropped to her knees and hugged her tightly, sobbing. The others followed, slower but open. They hugged her, touched her face, and cried. Even though they had lived so many years apart, the love was still there. The bond hadn't been broken. It was as if a missing piece of their hearts had been returned. They stayed at the cabin for the weekend, talking late into the night, looking at old photos and sharing memories. Lisa listened as each child told their story, how they had grown up, what they remembered, what they missed. Some of it was painful. They had gone through so much without her. But she didn't shy away from her feelings. She let them cry. She let them be angry. And she told them over and over, "I never stopped loving you." David watched them from his wheelchair, his heart full. He had spent years raising 5 children alone, hoping one day this moment would come. Seeing them together again made all the struggle worth it. Lisa apologized for everything they had missed, but the kids didn't want to talk about the past too much. They wanted to focus on what was ahead. They wanted to make new memories. In the weeks that followed, Lisa slowly began to rebuild her life. She moved back home, though she took things one step at a time. She started therapy, spent time alone with each child, and began volunteering at a local shelter. It wasn't easy. There were days when fear came back, and nights when she still had nightmares. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had her family, and they had her. The police continued to investigate, and with Lisa's help, they found others who had also been hurt by the same group. Slowly, justice was being served. One day, as the family sat together in the backyard under the setting sun, Lisa looked around at the faces of her children. They had grown strong and kind. They had become beautiful people. She reached over and held David's hand. "Thank you for never giving up on me," she said. He smiled and whispered, "Welcome home." The pain of the past would never fully disappear, but the love they shared would always be stronger. And finally, after 14 long years, the Wilson family was whole again.